Welcome to the Autism in Black podcast, where we focus on all things autism and the Black parent experience. Our goal is to always educate, support, and empower parents to advocate for not only their children, but themselves. Hello, and welcome to the Autism in Black podcast. I'm Maria Davis-Pierre, a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Florida and America's #1 autism advocate for Black parents. I am the founder and CEO of Autism in Black, Inc., where we aim to include the excluded. Today's show is sponsored by the Autism in Black virtual conference happening April 1st through 4th of 2021. You can go to www.autisminblack.org/conference to find out more information, as well as to purchase a ticket. Today, we have Rachel Pretlow. Rachel describes herself as a blowing wind. Identified as being on the autism spectrum in early adulthood, Rachel has been growing into the role of a self-advocate. She is an interdimensional grower, writer, healer, learner, and manifester. She is a daughter of 2 fierce fighters, a sister of an activist, and a granddaughter of Black folk who built this country from the soil up. Rachel considers her life purpose to be to cultivate and be cultivated by the land, planting ancestral seeds of nourishment, culture, and wisdom. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. Rachel shared so much about herself, about her personal journey with getting a diagnosis in early adulthood, as well as having to deal with some mental health challenges. So I hope you enjoy today's show. Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Autism in Black podcast. I'm very excited about today's guest. Today we have Rachel Pretlow, who is going to talk us through her own journey. How are you doing today, Rachel?
I'm doing very well. How are you, Maria?
Good. Glad to have you on the show. So I have read your bio already, but can you tell us more about yourself and who you are?
Absolutely. So I am from the ancestral lands of the Chesapeake people in Hampton Roads, Virginia. I am a very holistic, spiritual, and intuitive person. I recognize that all of the elements that provide us with life, be it water, earth, animals, plants, like we are all sacred. And I see myself as an extension of nature and a mirror of all life, both human and non-human. I really love being in service to others. I know that I have been blessed with so much and recognize that I always have everything that I need. So I see it as my duty to serve my community in whatever way that I can. I'm very conscious and intentional about promoting the health of my mind, body, and spirit through meditation, yoga, journaling, and nutrition so that I can really be the best person possible for myself and for my community. I cherish the connection that I have with my ancestors. They are very much present in my life. And while I'm in my 20s still, I think of myself as a model and an elder for folks who are both younger and older than me. I am currently living in Virginia, and I also call New Mexico home. This is the place where I found my people for the first time, people who speak the same language as me. So I spend part of the year living in New Mexico and part of the year living in Virginia. And I often think about liberation and how that applies in all aspects of life. I really strive to live as a liberated being, following my spirit and living my joy openly.
I love that. Absolutely love that. You left me kind of speechless there. So I love that. But as someone who was identified as autistic in adulthood, I know you're working and growing into the role of being a self-advocate. How has that journey been for you?
Yes. So I was in denial for a while about how autism affects my day-to-day life and did not even really consider speaking up for myself in relationships or at work as an option. I just expected myself to deal with all of the challenges, even though my early adulthood, I was really living in a state of suffering. And I think that, a big part of my mindset, especially in my early 20s, was related to being socialized as a Black woman and being in environments most of the time with neurotypical, highly privileged white people. So I just had a view that my needs came last, or well, more accurately, that my needs were non-existent. But in 2018, I realized that I wanted to actually experience enjoyment in being with people. I definitely considered opting out of community entirely and living in seclusion, but I knew that that would be unsustainable and I really wanted to take a risk. So I decided to try something different. I was living in Albuquerque, New Mexico at the time, and I enrolled in a year-long program with the University of New Mexico's Center for Development and Disability. And that program brought me together with other young adults with autism for the first time. And I formed meaningful relationships with participants and staff. And that was something that was really new for me. The program motivated me to engage more in autism serving organizations and more broadly disability serving organizations, and also to find my voice outside of those settings. So I've been advocating for myself more fervently since then in my personal relationships with family and friends, talking about autism openly and expressing my needs, especially around my sensory experience, and speaking up if something doesn't work for me. So just finding ways to compromise. And along with this, I was proud to assist with the University of New Mexico's Autism Plus program. This is a program that aims to educate community organizations about promoting accessibility, inclusion, and meaningful engagement of people with disabilities. So, going beyond just, tolerating, us for being in the space, or, including us in the space, but moving into accepting folks with disabilities in different spaces. So I brought this training to my workplace at the time, which was at a national wildlife refuge. And I helped to promote the discussion of how to make the visitor center accessible for all people. And, now that I'm in Virginia, I am getting more connected with the autism community and disability community here, and seeing how I can also be in service to myself and also to the community in this state.
That is amazing. I know, as a parent who advocates so hard, one of the things that I always try to make sure that I'm doing is also encouraging not only my oldest, but all of my children to advocate for themselves, because it is so important for them to learn that, to be able to do it and stand up for themselves. So I love that you had that mindset shift and started living more authentic to you. So I love that. And I know you're also on a journey to self-love and authenticity. So how does that tie into you being a self-advocate?
Yeah, so I'll really emphasize that this is a journey and it comes up day to day. Self love to me is acceptance. So, self love is me working with what I have, embracing all parts of me and making the best of everything. So before I could find my way to self advocacy, I needed to let go of a lot of self judgment. And, this continues to be a daily practice as well. It takes a while to, go from, your brain automatically thinking that you're wrong or you're stupid or, like you need to change things, and, rewiring that to believe that, I am perfect exactly as I am and I am meant to be here. So, yeah, self love is an ongoing process that has allowed me to feel safe within myself and feel the courage that I need to show up authentically and an authentic interest in having my needs considered and met.
Wow, that is amazing. And I know you talked about being in denial about some of the challenges that you were experiencing. Can you tell us about those for those who, maybe experience some of those same challenges?
Yeah, definitely. So I'll say that, masking and camouflage has played a big role in my life. It still does have a role. I bring it in where I feel like it is necessary. But in my early adulthood, as I was transitioning into adulthood, it was a daily, pretty much all day sort of experience. For instance, when I went to college, I just used my sister as a model. She's 2 years older than me, and she was also in college at the time. And I just figured out what I was supposed to do based on what she was doing. I joined a sorority, I was going out to parties and being surrounded by a lot of noise and lights and a lot of people and just feeling very, very overwhelmed like all of the time. And then also like not allowing myself to, to release any of that because, I was also kind of in judgment about stimming. Like I didn't know the word stim at the time, but I would do rocking and waving my hands and things like that. So I was in denial both of the needs that I had around my sensory environment and my social environment, and also the needs that I had to release all of that all of that tension.
Wow. And a lot of research has been done, especially on females and masking. And then I would really love
Hmm.
a study to be done on Black females who are masking, because for us, for Black women, we already have to navigate life completely differently. One as Black and then as a woman, but then adding in that disability factor, it just makes things even more difficult to have to navigate the society because, of course, of how they tell us how we should navigate society. So, kudos to you
Hmm.
for having that mind shift.
Thank you.
And then I know you also wanted to highlight mental health and transitioning into adulthood. Now, when you transitioned from high school, did you have any IEPs or 504 plans in high school or elementary school?
No, no, not at all. I was just in gifted education for my entire K through 12, pre-K to, through 12 life. Yeah, it was in my first year of college that I was identified as being on the spectrum. But yeah, and just like normal, like in with, all of the other like gifted students, no like specialized education, anything like that.
You are considered a 2E kid. That's twice exceptional, gifted, and then also having a disability. So amazing. So when the transition to adulthood happened for you,
Mhm.
what were you dealing with? What were some of the things that were occurring that you had to now navigate that was different for you?
So my parents, just sheltered me a lot when I was, growing up. They could definitely tell that, we could all tell that I was different and, different in ways that, made them feel like they needed to protect me, especially because like it was difficult for me to like understand like social dynamics in particular. And, like we know that can become dangerous if there aren't folks around to help navigate through that. But you know since I didn't have a diagnosis and folks just thought I was like smart and shy and naive, I went out to college and was expected to live independently. I went to college in a different state than where my family lives, and was just kind of out there on my own, and I did not have the skills that I needed in order to to live independently. So the things that my parents would normally take care of, like interacting with other people for me or like explaining away my behaviors to different people, like I was in the position of needing to do it all for myself, but I didn't know how to. Yeah, like all the responsibilities of being a new student, all of the academic responsibilities and like learning how to live with new people and all of, in and of themselves were enough, but then just adding in that I did not have the skills to like be able to navigate day-to-day life that just kind of all came crashing down on me.
And then how did that impact your mental health?
So I know now that there is a high co-occurrence in autism of mental health conditions like anxiety and depression, and these can emerge or worsen in early adulthood around the time of transition. But my family didn't talk about mental health. I didn't really have it, in my mind that like having mental health struggles was something that I could experience. But, I did experience a lot of anxiety was basically my constant state when I was in college and when I was in grad school. You know, like I had no idea who I was, and I thought I was, defective and hated myself for lots of reasons, especially for being Black and for, being what I considered as socially inept. I questioned, am I even human? Or, my lived experience of living in brown skin, I really recognize with the legitimate question that many of us reckon with, does my life matter? And, just because I was using camouflaging and masking a lot to get through the day, just really feeling a heavy weight. I knew that I needed to get help. So I started seeing a counselor, and, even after I was identified as having autism, like I felt burden and shame around that, and still had these really high expectations on myself to be able to navigate everything successfully. So I was doing a lot of self-harm at the time, and then was like blaming myself for doing that too. In the spring semester of my junior year, I had to go into psychiatric hospitalization. Mm-hmm. And that began a period of being highly medicated, and I was sent out. Well, I could no longer study on campus because the administration thought I could potentially be a danger to other folks. And so I was sent home to do my studying. And so, I felt a lot of shame around that too, like, how can I be so smart and, have all of these problems? So, for me, like the medications were not really helpful because they were not addressing the core issues that I had of like hating myself for all of these different reasons and for being overwhelmed with life as I was choosing it.
And when you were getting your services, because this is one, I'm glad that you are on the show, informing us, because I had no idea that the transition into adulthood put the individual at higher risk for mental health issues. So thank you for, letting me know that. So while you were receiving your mental health services, do you feel that there was a struggle with the actual practitioner knowing how to accommodate your needs as someone who also had a disability, as a person who is autistic, and then the anxiety on top of it?
Yeah, I'll say that none of the people who I spoke to, through the counseling center at my college, like none of them knew how to relate to me. And I mean, like for one thing, talking was a big part of the sessions that I would have with the counselors. And, for me, just, on the spot kind of question and answer about what I'm feeling doesn't it doesn't allow me to express in the ways that I need to express how I'm feeling. I remember there was one person who I was seeing actually at the time when I went into psychiatric hospitalization who told me that like there was no way that I could be on the spectrum because I was able to talk and have a conversation.
Oh, wow.
And so there were, I definitely experienced the mental health professionals coming in with stereotypes of, what they thought autism looked like. And I just didn't, I didn't match, their expectations, and also, experiencing kind of their inflexibility and knowing how to engage with me in a way that was actually beneficial to me. I think, there was also a barrier of, all of the people who I saw, were white as well. And, like there's no way that they could understand or even take into consideration, like, certain questions that they would need to be asking about my experience, not only as a person on the spectrum, but also just like, being a person of color in, a very highly privileged white academic space. Like a lot of, what I was experiencing, the struggles that I was experiencing were just due to that fact of just, having a lot of weight being on me to like need to prove myself, to need to prove, that Black people are people, being in that space. So yeah, I think having that culture difference was a barrier, ended up not serving my needs.
Yeah, I know one of the things that when I'm talking to my colleagues and training them, this is one of the things that irritates me so much is because when you're adding in all of those intersections, there's things that you really have to navigate as a professional, and
Mm-hmm.
being authentic and even knowing that sometimes you can screw up, but knowing that I can go back and actually have this conversation with this person and let them know, hey, I was not validating your experiences. To tell you that, you're not what they think is autistic is just so harmful as a professional to tell their client that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is just so harmful. And I can't even imagine how that, again, made you feel when you're already struggling with identifying that aspect of yourself.
Yeah, going to that particular college and, having the mental health experience that I did there, I think it was very important for me because it showed me like how much of the world actually is. I came in, very positive, optimistic mindset, like everybody is going to be able to understand me and, relate to me in the ways that I want to, be related to. And still certainly now I am very optimistic about life. And now I do realize that a lot of people are not going to have my best interests in mind. And so, if I need something, like I need to be the one who is voicing those needs and advocating for myself and speaking up, when things are clearly like not serving not only me, but many of the other people who are in the space who might be having the same experiences that I am having, whether it be another person who is living with an invisible disability, or another person of color, or, maybe just another young person who just hasn't, learned how to hasn't learned what their authentic voice is yet.
I love that. And I thank you so much for, sharing something so personal with us. So I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to take a little shift because I know you are extremely passionate about farming, as you have talked about some in
Mm-hmm.
the beginning. But can you talk about how you turned your
Mm-hmm.
passion into a career?
Definitely. So I believe in God. I believe that God, the creator, gave humans this world to steward, to take care of. I believe that we as people are members of nature. We are extensions of nature. And so everything that happens in our environments directly affects us. So I felt a calling since I was in college to pursue farming, but I didn't take it seriously at that time because I was very much thinking that I needed to, like, since I was smart, like I needed to be a doctor or something. That just wasn't the right path for me. But I did start listening and being obedient to that calling last year, because I remember there was a day last fall when I woke up and I just heard a voice so distinctly say that I needed to move back to Virginia from New Mexico and start farming. And in that message that I received, I could feel that my ancestors were telling me to go back to our family land here in southeastern Virginia and grow food. So my great grandparents were sharecroppers, and somehow they were able to save money and buy land here in southeastern Virginia, and they raised my grandfather and his 21 siblings there on that land. But since their generation, folks haven't been actively farming there. And I know that for my family, like for, most Black families in this country, working the land is associated with trauma.
Mm-hmm.
There's the trauma that we have from slavery, the trauma of our land being systematically stolen from us by the government and concentrated into white hands. There's also the trauma that the land holds and having been the site of genocide of indigenous peoples and murder and pillage of human beings and also of other organisms that our earth supports. I read a book called Farming While Black by Leah Penniman. She is a Soul Fire farm in New York, and that is a farm that is all about changing the narrative of the food system, from being one of oppression or being one that does not care about the health of Black or Brown people, and to being a food system that is led by Black and Brown people, and has at the forefront the health and wealth of the entire population in mind. So in reading this book, I learned so much about the history of not only farming in the Black community, but also farming cooperatively in the Black community with folks in Black history like Fannie Lou Hamer and others who have really been proponents of cooperation in agriculture. When I read the book, I decided to apply for a farming apprenticeship on a small organic family farm outside of Richmond, Virginia, which is a former capital of the Confederacy. Mm-hmm. And I knew, pretty much right away that farming was going to be, what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. And I completed that first apprenticeship last month, and I'll be starting a second apprenticeship in March on a farm on the eastern shore of Virginia. And this farm practices biodynamics, and this is essentially practices that bring in holism and spirituality into the tending of land and vegetables and animals. And that really resonates with me. But, I view my calling into farming definitely as a way that, serves the needs that I have in, my working environment and my living environment. I've tried other indoor work settings, and, those don't really work for me very well. I need to be outside and moving around and have the soil underneath my fingernails. I also, view going into farming as a contribution, one way that I can contribute to righting the wrongs that my ancestors experienced in, being forced to farm, and, bring healing to my family, bring healing to my family's land, and bring healthy and culturally relevant, fresh food to my community so that we can heal our minds, bodies, and spirits together. So now I am working on building connections within the community of Black, Indigenous, person of color growers, so that when I'm ready to, have a project of my own, that I can, find a group with whom I can grow cooperatively, because things are much easier and more effective when there is cooperation rather than competition.
Wow. And I just love how you took your passion and turned it into a career. And it also ties in with being authentic to who you are and that self-love and advocating. So, taking, leaving the college and saying, okay, I know what I'm supposed to be doing, and that is farming, and then turning it into something that you're doing is amazing to me. First of all, I don't know anything about farming at all, but you have got me interested now, and I need to go get this book and read it. And for those listening, it will be in the show notes, but it's just amazing to me. Are there anything in particular that you do want to grow and to farm?
First, I'll say that, farming and growing food is accessible to anyone, regardless of if you have a large plot of land. You can grow sprouts on a windowsill. If you have a balcony or a porch, you can, grow potted herbs and vegetables there. So, it is more accessible than I think many folks think. I am very interested in growing seeds that are like heirloom seeds. So these are like plant varieties that have been around for a long time, 100 years plus. I'm really interested in, growing seeds that are from West Africa. I'm interested in growing different food varieties that are also native here to Virginia and to the Mid-Atlantic more widely. I'm very passionate about growing native seeds, indigenous varieties of different crops. And so, thankfully here in Virginia and in North Carolina, we have several seed growers who focus on the ancestral seeds of the African diaspora. So, looking at things like particular varieties of sweet potato, different things like that, corn. Yeah, I'm really interested in that because I think that there is a sort of soul connection that exists between, a person who is from a certain place and the food that is also from that place. And I think that there have also been many case studies and other studies that have shown that when people eat food that is from a diet before colonization, so eating the foods that, are not including, fats and oils and, fried being, the main way of cooking or, lots of milk and meat and things like that. Like if you turn back the clock in a sense and go back to the way that, our ancestors were eating just a couple of generations back, even that heals the body of so many different ailments that are specifically related to us eating food that we are not supposed to be eating, but that, we have been kind of forced into eating because like fried food is cheaper and, it's faster. And if that's what you have, then that's what you are going to eat. But there are ways for folks to, to bring nutrition and culturally relevant nutrition into their lives, starting out in a small way and working up from there.
Wow. Thank you for dropping so many gems and sharing so much of yourself with us. I truly appreciate that. As we begin to wrap up, what is one tip or word of advice you have for listeners regarding your self-advocacy and self-love and being authentic to who you are?
I'll say to strive to know yourself completely. So I spend a lot of time with just myself. That is now often by choice. And, before I started this journey of self-love, much of the time that I was spending by myself was just not peaceful and not fun. But at some point, I realized that if I was going to be spending so much time with myself, I might as well be productive with that time and enjoy my company rather than being in a narrative of victimhood and suffering. So, yeah, like really get to know yourself and value that quality, quiet time with yourself in which you can just sit and reflect on you, uplift how beautiful you are, be honest about like where you get to grow, determine which risks and challenges are right for you. I continue to experiment to figure out what works for me and really practice self-awareness to identify how I'm doing in any given situation and what needs to change. But I think, taking risks and challenging yourself is so important. We've got to get out of what is comfortable
Yes.
because in getting uncomfortable and
Mhm.
embracing chaos, that's how we're able to learn and grow. So, a big part for me in this process is learning to make friends with making mistakes because mistakes are inevitable and they're completely necessary in order for that growth process to happen as well.
Love that. And where can people go to get in touch with you if they want to find out more about farming, or for those individuals who are autistic themselves and having that transition into adulthood? Where can they contact you?
Yeah, so people can email me directly. I prefer that direct engagement. So my email address is rpretlow one@gmail.com. And yeah, I'd love to hear from anyone who wants to engage any further.
Perfect. Thank you. And we'll have that in the show notes as well. Rachel, thank you for being on the show. Thank you for sharing so much of yourselves with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Maria.
And thank you all for listening. And we will see you on the next episode of the podcast. If you haven't done so, make sure to subscribe to our podcast so you can always be notified when a new episode drops. To get the resources shared on today's podcast and the show notes, make sure to go to autismandblack.org/podcast. And be sure to share your takeaways from the show on IG stories and Twitter using our official hashtag AIBpod so that we can find them and share them. And if you want to continue the conversation from today's episode, make sure to join our Autism in Black podcast Facebook community. And please make sure to answer the questions to gain entry. Thank you for listening and joining me this week. Have a good one.